Good evening and welcome to The Square. Tonight is a very interesting discussion where we discuss Rwanda's regional and continental role across Africa when it comes to peacekeeping, security, and more. We're also going to look at current events in this regard. As we all know, Rwanda recently sent 1,000-man contingent, men and women actually, from the Rwanda Defense Force as well as the Rwanda National Police to Mozambique to help with security, insurgency issues regarding terrorism, in Cabo Delgado, which is the northern province in Mozambique. These are some of the issues we want to understand. These are some of the issues we want to examine and look at regarding Rwanda's growing role when it comes to peacekeeping and security, not only in the region but also continentally and even globally. My name is Diana PC, host of The Square. As always, I'm joined by The Square resident panelists. I'm happy to introduce my resident panelists sitting very far away from me in respect of COVID measures. Bernard Namata, great to always have you on the show.
Thank you, Diana.
Also joining us, as always, a resident panelist on the show, Charles Haba. Charles, also great to have you tonight with us.
Look at Diana. We're the ones who are supposed to be introducing her back to the square.
Back to
Diana,
the square.
how are you?
I'm good, Charles. And thank you for the grand, very warm welcome. Thank you. It's great to be back.
Yes.
Of course, we have guests who are going to help us also understand, the topic tonight. I would like to introduce Dr. Eric Ndushabandi. Dr. Eric is the director of the Institute for Research and Dialogue for Peace. Dr. Eric, great to have you on the square. Also joining us is Dr. Fred Goloba Mutebi, who is an independent researcher and analyst. Dr. Mutebi, great to have you on the square.
Thank you for inviting me there.
Thank you. We'd have loved to have both of you on the show, but unfortunately, we're back to having our virtual conversations with our guests due to the rising cases, people being infected by the coronavirus. So these are really measures to respect, restrictions to respect measures to do with the COVID-19 pandemic. So as we always do on the show, we kick off with a few weekly highlights from the Square resident panelists, things that have caught their attention that they'd just like to lightly discuss. Charles, I'll kick off with you. Is anything that has caught your attention thus far in the week?
First of all, on a lighter note, it feels a little bit strange to sit very far away from the ladies.
I know.
I'm not too sure I feel ditched. But that said, I think one of the things that has really caught my mind is the poor institution of electro gas turned reg, turned WASAC, turned UCL, turned, I don't know what's going to happen next. So water, sanitation, electricity, sewage management, the whole tossing up and down. Not only is it the institution that has the highest turnover of leaders, but it's also the institution that has been tossed around quite a little bit. I know the cabinet minutes of the meeting tonight are not yet out, but I think they might come out with the institution split again in 4.
Oh dear. Let's see what happens in that regard. Brenna, any midweek highlights you'd like to share?
The COVID numbers. I think for the last 2 weeks, if you look at the cases, more people are dying, and it's still a problem. So I think until we all take the responsibility to take care of ourselves, then the statistics will remain the same.
Based on tonight's cabinet meetings, what are your thoughts? Do you think there'll be even tougher restrictions, or will maintain the current ones, or ease them? I don't think anything will be eased soon.
At this point, you don't want to be the finance minister, you don't want to be the health minister, because everybody is tired of the pandemic. So it's a delicate balance. How do you live with the pandemic? So I think the cabinet minutes would reflect that. How do you, balance? Have a bit of continuity, but also protect lives. Yeah,
true. Thank you very much, Charles and Brenna. So going back to our guests, thank you very much for joining us, both of you, Doctors Fred and Dr. Eric. And the first question I want us to tackle, just before we kick off into, some of the very interesting events that have been happening in this regard, with regards to Rwanda's growing peacekeeping and security role across the continent, is to do with, let's kick off with peacekeeping. So according to UN figures, as of 31st March 2021, this year, Rwanda is the second largest contributor to UN peacekeeping operations globally, with a combination of 6,335 officers from both military and police personnel. So just to kick off the discussion, I think it's important to look at this Rwanda's dedication to peacekeeping in different countries across the globe, especially against the backdrop of how peacekeeping really failed us as a country during the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. So my question to you is, why do you think it's of great importance for Rwanda to really maintain its dedication and commitment to peacekeeping across different countries, globally? And I'd like to kick off this discussion to you, Dr. Mutebi.
Thank you, Diana. I think there are several reasons why it's in the first place, the lessons. The government of rights from during the war and the genocide against the Tutsis. So the abandoned Rwandans during that by national community and much everyone else, except for a few Ghanaians and Ethiopians who are here, was a great lesson. And I think Rwanda determined they will, as much as...
Dr. Fred, I'd just like to interrupt you briefly. You keep on going on and off. Is there a way you can just double check on your microphone, just to make sure it keeps on cutting?
My microphone should be fine. I don't know why it's going on and off. It's not muted. It might be the connection, about which I may have very little to do right now.
Okay, carry on.
Yeah, so I was saying that for Rwanda, stepping up to come to the rescue of people in difficulty is now considered to be a duty. And this is coming from the 1990s, as I said. I think that it also had some added value in that Rwanda being the physically small country that is in the middle of East and Central Africa, and I think you may agree with me that for 1990, very few people knew about Rwanda, even where Rwanda was. But this role has given Rwanda great visibility, has lifted up its profile, has given Rwanda a role not on the continent but internationally. And I think that can only be a good thing for a country that have already, given that it has now lifted up its profile. It enables it to exercise a great soft power, which for any country is a very good. So I think that for those reasons, this aimed for the good of Rwanda's health, but also for Rwandans.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fred. Hopefully the connection will be better when we come back to you. The next, yes, I would like to also pose this question to you, Dr. Ndushabandi Eric. If you could just shine some light on, the importance of Rwanda's commitment to peacekeeping globally against the backdrop of peacekeeping that failed us as a nation during the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi.
Thank you, Diana. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Good. Let me bring it back far and to understand why for Rwanda is very important to engage in these peace operation missions. Let's remind ourselves that the concept of peace operation missions is very, very much developed and deployed between 90s, 95, and even we can include even what we call the UNAMOS in 92, 94. But what is very important here too is to understand when one is intervening in a context where the national or the UN missions abroad We are in a context where it has been questioned and the failures have been mentioned many times in terms of peacekeeping and humanitarian action, which are generally accompanied with a political agenda in the context of peace.
Dr. Eric?
In the context of peace, yes.
Yeah, sorry, we just lost you for a minute.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
The humanitarian action, the peace enforcement, all these mechanisms of peace building have been failing many times. So there are recent cases, one case where the UN is failing and the international community to save lives in Rwanda. So the context is changing now. It is terrorism now. So I think what we can mention for Rwanda, this is showing once again its capacity, and Fred said, it's a part of soft power and presenting its image in the continent and contributing in the context where the some regional blocks are facing the problem of coordination and very quick responses when ones are formulated. I need to remind ourselves that this is based on showing the capacity of Rwanda and the political will, based on the internal dynamics, where Rwanda have been incredible many times in leadership, in developing its image towards abroad. So I think it is very important to understand this mission in this context. Then Rwanda is benefiting from both in its capacity, leadership, and political will, and it will bring this idea of the SAF partnership or SAF responses to crisis. And the request of Mozambique to Rwanda is based on this perspective. So this is a proof that Rwanda have been contributing to many cases in Sudan and Central Africa. So all this is serving the credibility of Rwanda to serve in this position.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Eric. Thank you very much, Dr. Eric and Dr. Fred. I'm really hoping that our connection can improve as we go further down in the segments of the show. I would like to just also throw this question, this first part of the conversation to the Square Western panelists. And Charles, I'll kick off with you.
First of all, I just sort of wanted to pick from what Dr. Ndushavandi has said, and it's one of the moments where you want to be a proud Rwandan. On a note that might sound a little bit controversial to our fellow Africans, this is one of the best moments to be a proud Rwandan, because you're basically talking about the point he alluded to about soft power. You know, who doesn't want to be associated with a powerful leader? By virtue of the fact that President Kagame has put himself in a global position of a global statesman, it sort of trickles down to us, the Rwandans, and in terms of especially being very proud of having a leader of his stature who's being called upon by every other country. But that aside, I think some of the things that are rarely not sung about is what this means to the common statesman, to the common serviceman. And I want to talk about the livelihoods of the officers and men of the police and the army.
And women.
Yes. And, when you have an opportunity to serve your country at an international stage, it means that you're most likely going to have a thicker wallet. If you have a thicker wallet, it means naturally your family, your welfare, and everybody else is going to be served a lot better. But that's now at an individual level. Now, when you scale it up and look at the economy, because you see, there's that individual who is earning a little bit more than he was earning if he was just looking after Bana's security as she's driving to RBA. but there is the equipment, there is the guns, there is the cars, there is the uniform. There's a lot more that the government of Rwanda rents or hires to these AU or UN organs, and then brings in revenue into the country. So from a revenue perspective, I believe that's a huge income earner that would have otherwise only dreamt about, especially in the wake of COVID. Now, those are 2 points. So there's one of the global statesman, there's one of individual and continental growth, but there's also the other thing of, I think Dr. Golova alluded to it, the fact that we, once beaten, twice shy. It's a very simplistic way of saying it, but the fact is there's no better person to play in the global security space, to preach global security than Rwanda. We've been beaten, we've lost millions of people, we know what it means to be abandoned by the globe. So when we are called upon, it would just be foolhardy of us not to want to come through, especially that we have built our capacities. So Dan, I think those are some of the things that really immediately come into my mind in terms of our role in building continental peace and security.
Thank you very much, Charles. Brenna, over to you.
I think if we go back to the last almost 40 years, we are seeing a shift globally. For a very long time, we had some countries, especially in the developed world, that had kind of monopolized this space and had kind of created an impression that only them can do this kind of work. Mm-hmm. You can look at the US over the last 20 years and then look ahead the last 27 years, look at how the US has been retreating from its responsibilities. You look at the UK, so the so-called advanced world that traditionally used to dominate the space in terms of peacekeeping operations. We are seeing that increasingly they are outsourcing, and that's for a reason. For the Americans, we know what happened in Somalia. We know what is happening in Afghanistan. So for me, when I look at Rwanda taking up the responsibilities around peacekeeping, one, this is a country that has managed to build its internal resources. Because let's be honest, there are many countries that would wish to be involved to that level, but they do not have the capacity. So if you see a country that is getting more involved in peacekeeping, that means they have the capacity. Not just internally, but also externally. Secondly, I feel that as Africans, for a very long time, again, we depended so much on what the West decides. And this is why, for instance, there's a buzz around the deployment in Mozambique. Without, UN Security Council, because traditionally, for a very long time, people are used to, it is the US that will send troops to Central Africa to find Konyi, for instance. And there's not to be a buzz around that. So, but as a country, I think, again, to what the other panelists were saying, Rwanda has been consistent and deliberate over the last 27 years, saying we are not just playing at national level, at regional level, we are playing on a global scale. So you can no longer look at Rwanda and say, oh, you are an African country, you cannot do this. Rwanda is at a different level. And you see this, not just in military, but in other aspects. I'll give you an example. Today, if we look at over the last year, during the pandemic, one of the few companies that managed to raise money globally the drone company that has raised money is a startup.
Zipline.
Yes, but I'm not allowed to. That's for someone else to figure out. Zipline, okay.
In Rwanda.
In Rwanda.
Yes.
So for me, I don't isolate Rwanda's peacekeeping mission from that. Rwanda that allows startups to come here and expand. 2 weeks ago, we saw the amount of money that Zipline managed to raise. Now, unfortunately, not so many are telling the story of where this company was born, you know? So for me, when I look at peacekeeping, it's within that framework, you know, of Rwanda playing on a global scale. Now, what does that mean? Again, for Rwandans. One, we have to feel privileged that, first of all, you are in a stable country that can start looking at peacekeeping elsewhere. If you look at the region, not so many countries actually in that have that luxury of engaging in peacekeeping. Secondly, I feel that the national conversation that has to happen also is to be grateful to the families that are allowing their members to go, on these peacekeeping missions, because we must accept it's a gamble.
We've lost our people to
yes, you know, you have body bags that come.
Exactly.
You know, so, but most of the time the conversation is distorted. People are just talking about the money, but we have lives. So if a country is saying we are, you know, putting these lives at stake, that means something, you know. So I feel that we need to look at peacekeeping just beyond the boots and look at Rwanda's positioning in the global economy.
Absolutely. I would like us to go to the next part of the conversation. Charles, is there something you wanted to add on what Brenna said before we go back to our guests?
Yeah, yes, of course there is. I want to slightly shift the conversation towards the sort of can of worms that Brenna has opened and what is in it for Rwanda. And that's, you know, there's a cost. There's a human life that has been put at stake. But there's also the reason why we go out there, the reason why Rwanda deploys, and what is in it for us. I think that's a very, very important conversation that we have, is that the price of peace is high, but the price of not being peaceful is a lot higher. And when you look at some of these things and you say, what did Rwanda go to do in South Sudan with the mission that was there? What did Rwanda go to do in the Central African Republic with the mission that is still there? What has Rwanda gone to do in Mozambique? Are we going to be paid in actual dollars? Are we going to be paid in petrodollars? Are we going to be paid in timber dollars? Are we going to be paid, you know, in all these dollars that you can think about? And then fast forward, you look at it and you say, you know, the other day we did witness quite a number of MOUs being signed in the Central African Republic when our president went there. Fast forward the other day when President Tshisekedi came to Rwanda and President Kagame crossed over to Rwanda, we had quite a few MOUs, and especially around business and trade. So it basically means that peace comes with business. Peace comes with trade. Peace comes with deals. So it's, the point I'm trying to raise is that we need to equate and have sort of a very, very open discussion to say that if we are going to deploy 1,000 troops into Mozambique, it's because we are going to, there's a multiple X of deals, there's a multiple X of dollars. So peace comes with deals. That's the point I wanted to raise, Diana.
So to speak. Thanks, yes. Charles. I would like us to just go back to our guests, and I'm really hoping that our connection tonight is better than it was when we began. And I'll kick off with you, Dr. Fred, since we didn't really hear much of what you had to say earlier on. So the next part of the conversation, you know, we talked about peacekeeping, but now we're talking about security. And Rwanda on 9th July sent 1,000 joint force. When I say joint, between Rwanda National Police and Rwanda Rwanda military, Rwanda Defense Force. So this force was sent at the request, of course, of the Mozambican government to the Rwandan government to help with terrorist insurgency in the northern province of Cabo Delgado. And of course, this has been met with praise from various bodies, such as the African Union, and it has also been met with, according to various media reports, with concern, so to speak, from the Southern African Development, from the SADC, from the Southern African Development bloc. And what I want us to tap on really is, against this backdrop, I think the most important thing is that lives have to be saved. It's not about which body, comes first or which troops are deployed first. This deployment, Rwanda reacted. It was also based on various agreements between both Presidents Nyusi and Kagame. So my question to you, just to hear your opinion, your expert opinion on this, is what is your take on this deployment of Rwanda to Mozambique, including others, but let's just focus on Mozambique for now, but against this backdrop of dispute within the Southern African Development Community? Over to you, Dr. Golobi.
Well, yeah, thank you. First of all, I think that is one of saving lives. It's an objective. Rwanda is a country that has good aspirations for itself, but also for the wider continent. And I'm sure you know that insecurity, wars, and all kinds of instabilities have really made it impossible for Africa to progress. Whether we are talking in economic terms, whether we are talking about social advancement, Africa is not going to be able to develop in the midst of these armed insurgencies that are occurring all over the place. And as you saw when President Kagame was leading AU, you could see that he really introduced a certain dynamic in that organization that was really geared at lifting up Africa from where we are to becoming a secure continent. Africa is not going to be secure and therefore prosperous, having outsourced its security to external actors. Africans have to step up and take charge of their own security so that they can stabilize and begin the important work of developing our economies, uplifting the standards of living of fellow Africans, both internally within our countries, but even outside of the countries. So I see this as Rwanda puts its money where its mouth is, to borrow a popular cliche. But Rwanda wants a stable Africa. Rwanda wants a prosperous Africa. Rwanda wants an Africa that is able to be proud of itself, that is able to do things for itself. And it's one thing to say these things and stay home when there are troubles brewing around you, but it's also another thing to respond to calls as the one that came from Mozambique. Go and help the Mozambique army and security forces to bring stability and peace to Mozambique. If Mozambique prospers, and one of the panelists spoke about deals, Mozambique prospers, Rwanda, but I don't personally think that the deals is the most important thing right now. The most important thing is stability. We see in our own neighborhood, DRC has been a source of great problems for Rwanda in the last 27 years. And the movements we see there under the new president of the DRC working very hard to try and stabilize that country. Again, open up markets, again, make it possible for DRC and Rwanda to prosper together. I think that these are the great ambitions that I applaud Rwanda for having and for stepping up from not only in words, but in action. Now, going to the issue of SADC, I think the problem with SADC is I think that Rwanda caused them some embarrassment. This problem has been festering in Mozambique for 6 months, and Mozambique being a member of SADC and their collective security arrangements, SADC, it was incumbent upon SADC to react quickly to Mozambique's rescue. I think that they were faffing around about who is going to command what, who will be the deputy commander. They've been sitting in endless meetings and not really stepping up to take action. And here comes Rwanda. Mozambique appeals to Rwanda, and within weeks, Rwanda deploys forces to go there. I think they're reacting in embarrassment. And unfortunately for them, serious observers can see through their expressions of concern at Rwanda deploying for them. Certainly, as President Nyusi has pointed out, Mozambique is a sovereign country, and Mozambique aspires to have its army participate alongside their armies coming in, and therefore both Rwanda and SADC will have a role to play in bringing order to Mozambique. But yeah, Rwanda has really stolen a march on SADC, and I understand why it will be complained.
Thank you, Dr. Fred. Yeah, you really don't mince words. You know, the reaction was one of embarrassment. As a SADC, as a community, SADC should have been, quick to be able to put forward its troops on the ground to help with these issues. Dr. Eric, what's your take on this? Rwanda's, deployment to Cabo Delgado in Mozambique against the backdrop of disputes within SADC. Over to you, Dr. Eric, and I'm hoping your sound is a bit better than we're hearing right now.
Thank you, Diana. Your voice is cutting off and on, but I'll take it from what Dr. Kuloba said. When we have been talking about the failure of the international system or the context of UN failures in different peace operation missions, we can see some element to base on to understand these discussions around SADC and responsiveness and the speed to respond to this kind of demand. We are talking about a military intervention, not a military intervention but in a context of terrorism, which is very, very particular context. When a country responds very quickly, knowing how complex is terrorism in this world and in this region in particular. So this is very courageous and it means very much. Second, we are in what we call in politics, the second generation of peace operation missions, which consist of renationalization. It means bringing it to state collaboration and agreement to intervene nation by nation. So when it goes to a grouping or a bloc like SADC, I think the traditional problems of sovereignty and credibility of member state of SADC towards Mozambique itself, it means that Mozambique will be looking at the relationship between Mozambique and each of those countries to be hoped and to receive these forces. Second is about the costs. You have to be very, very conscious of the costs because this is a political cost.
Dr. Eric, unfortunately, the sound was off, but thank you. We'll come back to you, Dr. Eric, but thank you for those salient points you mentioned regarding the security that Rwanda is providing in different countries and the renationalization of some of these issues. We'll come back to you, Dr. Eric, when the sound and the connection is a bit better, but I will take back this second part of the conversation to my resident panelists. And Berna, I will ask you to weigh in based on also reflecting on what our two guests have said.
I mean, if you look at regional integration across the region, continental level, we're actually yet to see some usefulness of regional integration when it comes to conflict. Never mind that on paper, whether it's the AU, whether it's the EAC, whether it's SADC, they have documents that are supposed to guide them when it comes to conflict resolution.
Exactly.
Conflict or preventing diplomacy. There are all these documents that all these continental bodies usually have. But usually what happens is the bureaucracy. You have the bureaucracy and then you have, of course, the politics, which is, I don't know whether I should call it the greed behind it. You know,
say it as it is, because this is what characterizes some of these issues.
So, for me, I wouldn't run to the region first. So I think Mozambique must have learned from some of our neighbors. Because the region rarely intervenes. We've seen that. So until we change how these continental bodies work, I think it would be far-fetched to think that you will have continental bodies resolve. We haven't seen that, really. So even if you have the big boys like South Africa crying, it's just, I mean, it's 4 years. Mozambique has been in the middle of this since 2017.
Exactly.
This is 2021. And then you're saying, oh, how did they deploy? For the last years, what were you doing, for Christ's sake? So I even don't know where they get the audacity to actually speak about the issue, you know. And what usually happens is they go back to the semantics of, you know, we're reviewing and there's a need for a proper framework.
Rwanda is not a member of the community.
Yeah, and you know, you have a back and forth, and then you have per diems of meetings. We have had this meeting, there's a follow-up meeting. And in the middle of this, people are dying, you know. People are dying. So for me, I feel that SADC should have just either kept quiet or, you know, so, but that's the nature of continental bodies. We saw it in Burundi, we've seen it, you know, look at Ethiopia. So I don't know what it will take to have functional regional bodies. You have leaders that try to bring these bodies together, and instead they become a problem because they're trying to say, let's get together and try to solve our problems. Part of the reason is because what is happening behind the scenes, you have external forces. You know, people sit in a meeting, agree at continental level, let's do ABCD, and then you have these external forces that say, no, you can't implement what you discussed. Otherwise, we'll maybe cut 15% of the budget that we've been giving you. This is the reality of continental bodies. So I feel SADC should do better than that, than, you know, having a war of words over who is where and who is not there. That's number one. Number two, we know that across the continent again, we are yet to get used to the idea of Africans solving their own problems. And that's why even public opinion, I mean, if you look at the commentary so far around it,
around the deployment.
You know, yeah.
Yes.
Because they're not used, you know, people are saying, oh, the UN, why didn't you go through AU? Since when? We know, for instance, 27 years ago, people could not even call it genocide because they were still around. So if you call it genocide, then who takes accountability for that? 27 years later, you're still saying, why don't we have these countries? You know, we're still looking to the same bodies to resolve issues. I don't think so. I think we have a problem.
Yeah.
We're not learning from the past. So for me, I feel that let's avoid the distraction. The distraction around, you know, who was there first, and just focus on saving lives. Two, it is a global problem. Terrorism is a global problem. So I don't know why there's a problem if you have more partners that are willing to deal with the issue. Because there's no country, even the superpowers themselves cannot deal with terrorism on their own.
Absolutely.
You know, so I feel that the conversation needs to change. And I'm glad that, you know, we have a few countries that will not accept to be distracted by, you know, the global analysts and, you know,
Thank you very much. I always love it when you're very impassioned talking about these issues, especially continentally, that really have been plaguing us. And, you know, this was just a refreshing move. This deployment, very quick. I think SADC said that we're going to deploy theirs tomorrow, 15th July. We're yet to see when that will happen. Charles, over to you.
You know, a long time ago, we used to look forward to the North Korean military parades. And there would be a replica of all the other military parades. because there would be a typical display of military might.
Exactly.
So you'd go on a parade and everybody puts up their rocket launchers, all their guns, and they show everything that they have. But today we're seeing that military might is not necessarily political might. However, that said, we have also seen a shift that the military might that you portray in public or for all cameras to see is not necessarily the military might that is required when it comes to action. So I hardly see the guns and the everything that the RDF owns, but I see a lot in the media about what the South African Army owns and what they have. But when it comes to where it matters most, on the continent, you see a lot about the RDF. But at the risk of sounding as an RDF publicist, I want to talk about the importance of these regional organs, and to sort of disassociate themselves from playing in the peace, security, and military space. I believe that the regional bodies should stay in their line, and their line should be business. Business, economics, trade deals, removing non-tariff barriers and what have you. I don't see, for example, a situation where DRC is knocking very hard on EAC's door, and EAC says, no, hold on a second. We want to first send our troops to fight with FDLR before we allow you to come into the East African community. So I believe everything has its own space. And you almost see that SADC, just like COMESA or EU or EAC for that matter, I think these should really remain in their comfort zone and their spaces for which they can easily influence and easily play, and that is in the economic space and in the business space. So I believe, of course, on the contrary, whereas military might may not necessarily be political might, but economic might translates to political might. So the point I'm trying to raise, Diana, is that these regional blocks, let Bana not drag them to pull out their guns. Let them stay in their business space and they'll have bigger impact. Yes.
Bernard, do you agree with that very quickly?
No, I mean, I actually don't think so, because we know, and this is from East Africa, we know that economic integration cannot progress until the politics is sorted. Most recently, we have France as an example. Until Rwanda had resolved some of its issues, not all issues are resolved with France. We're not seeing a lot of investment coming from France. What we're seeing that is changing over the last 5 years. So
show me where the guns are.
Okay, we're coming to the next part of the conversation, which is to do with silencing the guns. And this is a pledge that the African Union made that 2020 would be the year of silencing the guns. This pledge was made in 2013, as a continental body, saying that continentally we need to ensure peace and security and call for all nations to silence the guns. We're in 2021. As of today, there's still various conflicts on a large scale, in different parts of the continent. You look at the Sahel region, you look at what has been happening in the Central African Republic, you look at the Ethiopia-Tigray region, what's happening in Somalia, DRC, and that sort of thing, and we're still in 2021. My question to you, both doctors, and hopefully this time I'll start with Dr. Eric, and I really hope we're having a very unfortunate night with the connection. I hope your connection is much better. Dr. Eric, when it comes to silencing the guns, what do you think really needs to be rethought? What urgent rethink needs to happen regarding the AU's 2013 pledge to silence the guns in Africa by 2020? Dr. Eric, over to you.
I hope you can hear me now. Yes?
Yes.
Good. Talking from this point where you have been saying where are those guns today? It's very interesting at 2021. Those guns are today in Sudan, Sahel, everywhere, and Central Africa, and less in sub-Saharan countries. But we can say silencing the guns, it means just not silencing the confrontation or violence, physical violence, but it means the human security in general. And human security here means to go deep in root causes of those causes of the guns, which brings guns to be operational. Second is stopping, and we are talking about, for example, Mozambique and Rwanda's intervention is to go and stop terrorism, for example, is making peace. So beyond that, silencing guns is now to go down in the communities and respond to the demand of people really, and to feed secured for all. And this required the political will, first of all, strong leadership, but very multi-sectoral reforms, internal, from economic, from social, and political reforms. So, silencing the guns, I hope it will not be just a slogan. When you look at the environment at the continent, what we have been saying here is a failure for regional blocs to bring entity, or to bring governments really to be subjected to international treaties and a sense of collective security, and to respond to the demand of people. So there have been some steps ahead in African Union, for example, where we have been seeing some emerging political will in some government, and this is the case of Rwanda, for example, where we can see some inclusive governance, where we intend really to include everyone and to make sure that no one will need to take guns and fight. So this required an inclusive governance system and redistribution of economic gains to all categories of people, and to develop spaces for everyone really to express and rightly with the purpose. So this will bring maybe to articulate what is being developed internally or in domestic politics with the imperatives at the international level. So going at two levels, meaning domestic and international politics, and combine with a very strong leadership and political will of reforming system, which are very centered to people interests. I think this is a way of silencing the guns, and it seems like we are still far without being pessimistic. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Eric. Yeah, we are far from it. Although there has been some conflict over the last, 10 to 5 years that has really been quelled. So, also credit where it's due. But yeah, we're more guns blazing than silenced. That's from Charles. Dr. Fred, over to you. What urgent rethink do you think needs to happen when it comes to the AU's pledge on silencing the guns across the African continent? We can't hear you. Sorry.
Sorry, I had muted my.
No, it's okay. That happens to a lot of us in this day and age. So carry on, Dr. Fred.
Yeah, I'm saying that pledge amounts to the AU as such was something what internally in its member country. A lot of the wars we have in Africa was of sides where separates within countries, and different groups work for power from it out. Now that is Dr. Nushavandi, when far better than using competitive or competitive politics. We should be for political elite in our countries to try as much consensus seat in terms of governance, whereby politics in any country is as inclusive as possible, and fewer chances of getting breaking away. And so, now, the other thing that I help Africa somehow these regional economic blocks to create.
Dr. Fred, sorry. Unfortunately, we're really not having good luck with the connection tonight. You keep on breaking, but if you could just hold your thought before we come back to closing remarks. Sorry about that. Sincere apologies about this. I would like us to just go to a Twitter feed and look at what some of our viewers have been sharing in terms of their comments on this discussion tonight and their views, and then we will get back to our guest panelists. And apologies for the internet connection. So the first tweet, if we could have that on our screens, please, is from Rumbuguza, who says that, interesting indeed, the deployment in Central African Republic and in Mozambique is an example that Africa can find a solution to African problems. This is not only about military capacity, though the deployed contingent must be well trained and well equipped, but the message is, why don't we? And I think he echoes, Brenna, what you're saying about Africans being able to support each other in implementing security. We have another tweet coming in, and this one is from Rwanda Health, and they say that, I think rather than the West and other unsupportive African countries continuing to ignore Rwanda, it's time for all of these countries to recognize that a golden Africa needs more Rwandans who rush to help when a neighbor is attacked. So Rwanda Health is quite, you can see, supportive of this recent deployment by Rwanda to Mozambique and CAR in the past. We have another tweet coming in from Frank, and Frank states that the level of participation in peacekeeping operations is a double statement. One, the country's leadership walks the talk regarding the Kigali principles of protection of civilians. Two, that friends wouldn't find it wanting in these times of need. Case in point, Mozambique and Central African Republic. Thank you, Frank, for your tweet. We still have a couple of tweets coming in. And we have a tweet coming in from Ndore, who states that, thank you, panelists. I also believe Rwanda reproaches PK as it does peacekeeping as it does all other aspects of contribution to society, including defensive operations to national security with seriousness, discipline, and determination. Simple. A couple of more tweets coming in, and we have one from Luis Alejandro, who says that bearing in mind that we possess one of the most disciplined forces, not only on the continent, but also globally, it would only be fitting that our peacekeeping missions are given deserved credit. SADC should draw lessons and not criticize. That's one tweet from Louis. And I think last tweet, time allowing, is one again from Rumbuguza, who says that Rwandan example in Mozambique and CAR is a revolution and will be a case study in international relations schools. This is big and for sure political and intelligence strategists from the West following with interest. Rwanda is reshaping peacekeeping diplomacy in the world. Thank you very much. And that's all the time we have the tweets for. Please keep a conversation going on our social media feeds. We'll be sure to engage with you even after the show. I would like us to just go back to our our Square guests panelists just to hear their closing remarks, and apologies once again for the connection. And I'll start with you, Dr. Goloba Mutebi. Over to you.
My closing remark is that I think we should invest and confidence in regional blocks playing security. And that's precisely because of the numbers of countries involved and of the different ways in which they look at these conflicts. I would choose more bilateral arrangements so that countries can sign security agreements between and among themselves, so that in the event that any country's security or stability is threatened, especially by external forces, the capacity of the ease with which the other countries with which they have security agreements can deploy forces is it has been amply demonstrated by Rwanda now. Rwanda went to the Central African Republic very quickly. They have been very quick to get off their starting blocks to go to Mozambique, and I think bilateral arrangements make more sense.
Thank you.
Than,
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mutebi. Absolutely agree with you in terms of bilateral agreements, and I think that's what happened between Rwanda and Mozambique. Dr. Ndushabandi, very briefly, closing remarks on this very important topic. Dr. Ndushabandi? Okay, unfortunately, we've lost him. So that said, Berna, is there anything you'd like to add just very briefly?
On the silencing
Very
bans,
quickly, yes.
Yeah, just to say that we tend to create an impression that conflict is African.
It's not only.
It is not African. We know that almost every country has an element of fragility. We've seen this with Black Lives Matter. We've seen this in South Africa. So we've seen this again in Canada, the treatment of indigenous people. So let's not really shape conflict as an African problem.
Very important points.
Yeah.
Charles, as brief as possible.
Again, I prefer to differ with Bana. To disagree is very healthy, but it's also extremely important to create mechanisms under which you'd frame out the way you disagree and come out of it. I think Dr. Golova was trying to really defend these global groupings. I want to re-emphasize, at the risk of repeating myself, let them remain in their business space.
Thank you very much, Charles. Thank you to our guests, Drs. Golobi and Dr. Ndushabandi. Sincere apologies for the connection tonight on our virtual hosting of your guests. Hopefully this is something that won't happen again. Thank you very much to our viewers, to our partners, Uzi Collections and Bourbon Coffee. Thank you very much to also the people who've been sharing their views on our social media. Keep the conversation going using hashtag #TheSquareRW. Thank you for tuning in. Have a good night. See you again next week.